Hey, I'm Quincy and I'm a radio personality, but just like you, I'm always wanting to make better health choices for myself and of course for my family. Now that's why I've teamed up with my friend Dr. Dean Tyndall and the fine folks of New Life Naturopathic, the creators of new-lifeweightloss.com, to bring you a podcast focused on giving you the information you need to make the best health decisions for you and your family. Now, that's going to be without sway from what mainstream medicine has become. Now, this podcast, Pursuit of New Life, we're going to release one each Friday. And we're going to focus on debunking the mainstream medicine myths now associated with naturopathic, holistic medicine, while giving you clear insight into ways you can make your health a lifestyle and not a jump from fad diet to fad diet. Experts in the fields of biochemistry, chiropractic, physiology, women's health, and much more will weigh in on a range of topics, all designed to open your eyes, expand your knowledge, and bring you to new life. Now be sure to subscribe to Pursuit of New Life on all the podcast platforms, and also follow us on YouTube at newlifenaturopathic.com, and be joining us every Friday for Pursuit of New Life.
We have been doing this for a few weeks. We're so excited that you're coming along every Friday. Great information from the New Life Naturopathic team, the folks that have brought you new-lifeweightloss.com. Of course, you've heard us talk about it. We'll always talk about it because it's such a great program. But today, we've moved a topic up in our schedule because of something that's happened recently. And so Dr. Tyndall's going to comment, and he's very passionate about this, as we all are. The Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatrics, have made a fairly ridiculous recommendation in my estimation. I remember when I saw this come out, I thought of you first, Dr. Tyndall. I was like, I really want to know what he has to say on this topic. And then you sent the message and saying, hey, let's talk about this week. So why don't you get us all fired up about what they've made in this recommendation about childhood obesity today?
Yeah, so the Academy of Pediatrics came out and said for the treatment of childhood obesity, they're now going to include drugs and surgery into the mix, which is a very heinous thing that you want to do to your kids, especially when the problem is very simple to fix, which is eat healthy food. So do I want to subject my child to drugs that are very bad on their metabolism, or these surgeries? Over the years, I've had several of my patients who've gotten the bariatric surgeries and have died from because they end up with malabsorption problems and all kinds of stuff. It just shocks me how, and Dr. Stuber and I talk about this around the office, because as we deal with patients all the time, they're basically addicts. You talk to them about changing their food, and it's like telling a heroin addict they can't get a fix today. They're like, oh, I got to change what I eat. Oh.
Yeah, well, this takes to a whole new level what you always say about the magic potion or pill that people are looking for. This changes the whole thing for a child that isn't even really the one making these decisions and going to do some kind of a surgery as a child. It's crazy.
Yeah, and again, as what I find amazing is these doctors would actually, because these are a panel, a bunch of doctors, they sit around, they're like, let's go ahead and make a recommendation for giving drug surgery to these kids.
Wow.
Shit.
Wow. Well, Dr. Stuber, I know that you have some numbers. So let's jump into this with Dr. Stuber. First of all, reaction to this report and what you think, and then we'll jump into some numbers. How about that?
Absolutely. Well, my first thought was, I don't believe it. It's unbelievable. It's, astonishing. But then again, Dr. Tyndall and I probably say that 10 times a day. Perhaps I'll go over and say, oh, well, you're not going to believe what I just read, or you can't believe what I just dealt with, and him the same way. So, it's astonishing. It's frightening that people would consider doing something so drastic to their child for something so easy to fix. It'd be like, oh, you've got to hang them. Well, we'll just cut your finger off.
Oh,
And to me, that's the same analogy. So, it's sad is what it is. It's sad that people either don't understand or they don't care. I can't even get it. I don't know how to put it any simpler than that.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Well, let's take a look then. For the folks on YouTube at New Life Naturopathic, you can see this graphic, but we're going to, of course, for the ones listening on podcast, we'll be talking about some of these numbers and a look at childhood obesity.
Well, when you look at the numbers, childhood obesity in America, again, it's frightening. We have about over a third of our children in America are clinically overweight. Of those 25, the total is 25% are obese. The cause of that, number one, is fast foods, what they eat. Number two is their lack of activity. Parents, children aren't going to think about it. They do what you tell them to do. They eat what you give them to eat. It's estimated that, they have the little calorie counters when you go through places, and those calorie counters are not accurate. So
Right.
Please don't think that they are. They're generally, most people underestimate by 50%
Wow.
how many calories they're eating. They're just not accurate. They don't have to be accurate.
By 50%?
By 50%. Also, when they did a survey of people, as far as like how many children do you think are overweight, and people will say, oh, maybe 10%. People grossly underestimate how fat we really are.
Man.
And they look around and say, well, everybody else is this way. Well, again, if they're going to jump up the cliff, are you going with them? And one thing I notice with my patients is I'll tell them, go sit outside the high school, because the demographics are our adolescents are the fattest of all. Okay. The young children, not so much. And I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. Logically, toddlers run around. They get up, they walk, you ain't stopping them.
Yeah, mine definitely.
Passed out, it's like they go till they just pass out. So what happens is, as children get older and older, they get fatter and fatter and fatter. And again, 80% of overweight children are going to be overweight adults. Same with obesity. And of the 20% that say are overweight as children that don't go into adulthood obese, I think 95% of them will struggle with weight issues their entire life, either physically or psychologically. And what mothers particularly, again, I'm going to talk more about mothers and grandmothers because that's what I can relate to. I will compare it to people. If your child was drowning, you would not go shove their head underwater and hold them there to die. And yet, everybody, at least the mothers I talk to, grandmas that I talk to, they know there's a problem. They just don't know what to do to fix it, or they think there is no fix for it because they're so deeply entrenched in the fast food industry that it's sad. It really is. So,
Can I interject here just a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, here's what I find is astonishing is that, the grandmothers and the mothers, and it's the parents that are, I'm not trying to be mean. It's just the reality. And no, nobody likes to hear this, but it's the parents that are doing this to their kids. And what I find is just mind boggling is that they're talking about this as they feed the kids milk and cookies, or they're baking them a cake, or they're thinking about this as they drive them through McDonald's fast food restaurant, and there's again, that reason I'm having a hard time kind of getting out is just I just sometimes just so flabbergasted about what we're doing to our kids and the excuses of what we make so that we don't have to take responsibility for doing what's right by our kids.
Yeah. Miriam, do you want to chime in here? You were talking before we began this episode a little bit about, some of the patterns and some of the things that you saw growing up and even amongst some of your peers and their children even today. Do you want to comment kind of on the state we're in and how prevalent it is based on these numbers?
Absolutely, yeah. So growing up, I always noticed this as an issue all around me. A lot of my classmates from preschool up to middle school and even high school, I mean, mostly I would say preschool, a lot of them were uh, pretty overweight. Some of them were even obese. And uh, luckily, I'm one of the lucky people where, my parents did cook a little healthier. And my mom had enough time to cook, and she did. And I learned a little bit from that. But not all of these kids get that privilege. And, um, you know, Americans are so busy and just so caught up in just all, you know, the busyness and just the crazy busy world that we live in today, that parents just don't want to take the time to sit down and think about what is really healthy for their kids. I mean, let alone their own selves,
Yeah.
And I mean, we get it, everyone's crazy busy all the time, but like Dr. Tyndall said, sometimes we just don't want to take responsibility, and we don't want to point it back towards us and say, this is my responsibility. This is what I need to do, and of course, people love their kids and they want what's best, but they don't always know what's best. And a lot of it is pure ignorance too, unfortunately. But growing up, there was just so much fast food and, schools, even cafeteria lunches are pretty awful from what we know about them. All the candy, the Halloween and the holidays, and it's a lifestyle, and unfortunately that's what it has become. And fast food was definitely booming around where I was growing up, and for some kids that is all they would eat, because their parents were either too tired to cook, or didn't want to, or whatever it may be. A lot of them never brought their own lunches either, so they were stuck with awful cafeteria food. So it's really sad, like we're all talking about, but it's not impossible to fix, and things can be done about it.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the documentary Super Size Me in middle school. That really opened up my eyes to things. And I remember even as a child, I was drinking Coke and I was drinking processed food or eating processed foods and all the things, because I kind of got sucked into it as well. And my parents weren't always, behind me to watch everything I was doing. But then watching that documentary kind of changed things up. And luckily as a child, I was very attentive to these kind of things. And, not every child is. And children form habits, and that's such a critical age, because those are the hardest habits to break, is those that are developed when you are a child. And they grow with you as you get older. So, and that becomes your lifestyle. But,
Yeah.
And not every kid or child watched that documentary, and not every kid has access to the education and resources to know what is healthy. And sometimes their parents do, and they still don't do anything about it, but some parents also don't. So
Yeah.
and that's the other thing too. That's the difference is with children. It comes down to the consent of the parents, because they can't make their own decisions. They can just kind of witness what's around them and kind of make their decisions based on what they see. Unfortunately, a lot of kids are very susceptible to advertising as well, and we all know that our capitalistic society likes to take advantage of that, sadly, and capitalize on that. So yeah, there's just so many caveats to this issue that, but it's not impossible.
I think one of the things you said early about busyness, for parents, at least, having, I had some kids that I knew growing up that they would bring their, breakfast or lunch to school, and it would be Doritos and a Mountain Dew at, very young ages. And so, we're talking about these ages of the percentages and as they grow up, and those form by habits. So Dr. Stuber, as we were looking at these numbers earlier, this also, the graphic for people watching on YouTube, also talks about some things that you can try. We're talking about the doom and gloom of it because it's true, and it's flabbergasting, some of the things we're talking about. But there are some simple things people can do with their kids to try to break some of these habits early.
Well, absolutely. Obviously, the first thing is to make better choices. I've experienced it, but I don't quite understand as far as, quote, junk food. A lot of processed food and junk food it has so little nutritional value. I can tell people, I compare it to, would you put dirt on a plate and feed it to your child? Because nutritionally, you're doing just about that.
Wow.
And people just don't think about it. They think, oh, it tastes good. They're so addicted to what they want to experience as far as taste that they never get past what it's doing to their body.
Yeah.
And that's programming. I mean, that is 100, in my opinion, 100%. What you learn to eat is what you like to eat.
And I'd like to,
go ahead, Doctor.
Sorry, Julie, I want to interject on something.
That's okay.
The other, because it just reminds me of what we were talking about in the office the other day, that the food industry puts in these, they hire chemists to get you addicted to their products.
Right.
They put these chemicals in your food. And we got in a discussion the other day how it's kind of ironic that when they put these flavor enhancers in your food to up your dopamine levels in your brain to get you addicted, but increased dopamine levels depress your taste buds. So that's why these people really don't taste the terrible, awful food that they're eating, but they're getting the high. Back to that being an addict, they get that high out of eating that type of food because it's actually the chemicals in there that's getting them, that gets them addicted and gets them on it.
Excuse me, but you can tell generally, it's an observation. The less nutritious a food, the more stuff people put on it. For example, French fries. You got to dunk them in ranch dressing, ketchup, put cheese and bacon on them and whatever. Just like greasy hamburger. What do they got? They got pickles, onions. Yeah, I could go on. And what sticks in my mind is the ranch dressing and the ketchup on everything. Just to enhance the taste, because the brain's high, but the taste buds want something more, and it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
And worse and worse. When a child is the younger the child is introduced to those foods, the greater the addict they are. Just like if you give a child heroin at the age of 6 months, eating, children born addicted, they will struggle and struggle and struggle. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. People, for some reason, just do not look or choose not to take action about this addiction. We work very, very hard on other addictions.
Right.
Food, we are programmed that, that is my treat, that is my pleasure. It is one of the great pleasures of life, but food eating is to nourish our body. It is so we can repair and recover and continue to live.
Yeah.
And until you change that programming, if you've created the problem, you have to unprogram it. The simplest way to solve that is don't create the problem.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about programming, and we're talking about, trends and how these things happen over time. As children become adolescents, become adults, the numbers are staggering on how it progresses through each generation, for lack of a better word.
Oh, absolutely. mean, I'm of an age that we had McDonald's, but I think the first Hardee's came in. I mean, it just wasn't, we just didn't eat fast food. I mean, it just wasn't a thing. However, there was a day when fast food was cheap and inexpensive.
Mhm.
So, it kind of made sense. Oh gosh, well, people are going to do that because it's quick and it's inexpensive. So being American, we want the easy way out. Well, anymore, it's not cheap
No.
or inexpensive. I mean, you drive by like McDonald's, the place is wrapped all, the lines wrapped all the way around, and not just McDonald's, just about every fast food restaurant. And it surprises me that it's $15 to $20 for a meal.
Yeah, it's the convenience now more than anything, and that's what we've been conditioned and programmed to do, as we've been talking about.
I understand. I just don't personally see where it's convenient when you have to sit in that long line and then et cetera. It's expensive. I mean, you could probably go to the grocery store, get something to eat, take it home, and make it as fast as it would take you to go wait in the drive-through, et cetera, drive there after.
But that's not what the commercial says. I mean,
I know. And another point I have to make, because I am a grandmother. One thing grandparents are notorious is, and we should spoil our grandchildren. They are like little pieces of candy. I love them to death. Please do not reward your grandchildren with treats, ice cream, candy, foods that are so bad for them, because I listen to grandmas, and that's what grandmas like to do. Bring the grandkids over, give them cookies, give them this, give them that, feed them, do everything their parents don't want them to do. But don't be the person in your grandchild's life that literally is killing them, creating long-term problems for the child. There's so many other ways. It's just not, bad food is not a good reward. So I just want to reinforce that so much, because it's an automatic thing for grandmas.
Well, from Grandma Stuber to now Dr. Stuber, let's look at some numbers here. You were talking earlier, as we look at the graphic on our YouTube channel, New Life Naturopathic, and for those watching or listening by podcast, you can't see this, but we're going to talk about it. More than 17 million children in the United States are obese.
It's staggering. It's 30% of our children. They're estimating that by the year 2030, that number will be over 30 billion. Or 30 million, and we will have 50% of our children will be obese.
Wow.
That's, this isn't overweight. This is obese. So it's very, very serious, and it just goes faster and faster and faster and faster.
Wow. And Dr. Tyndall, what about the cost? We're talking about people affording convenience. The cost, based on this graphic and the research here, it says that the cost of obesity in the United States is $147 billion.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that these numbers don't, that are actually, there's a lot of hidden up. The number is probably a lot greater than that. And here's why I say that is because when you look at obesity, it's a nutritional deficiency issue. You're eating unhealthy food that's creating health problems. It doesn't have nutrition in it. So when you see these numbers, you also have to throw in there people who die from heart disease. That's because it's diet and stuff, cancer, diet, Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes, because you actually get, has to do with this. When I talk to patients, like, why did we run A1C test? And, basically what you're looking at is glycation of proteins. Well, basically that's what happens to your brain is that Alzheimer's is, over a period of time, the sugar actually crystallizes pathways in your brain with sugar. That's why they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Hormonal problems. Why? Because high insulin levels throws off. So now you look at thyroid problems, fertility issues, PCOS. I mean, it's that. And again, that's why we talk about our diet, and that's why we talk a lot about the diet. And that's why we actually put our program together, because the other issue out there is the art of cooking has been lost. And there's a lot of things that come with cooking that, like when I was talking to one of my patients the other day, I have her and her sister doing it together. I said, because we charge $39 a month for our program. The reason we keep it inexpensive, because we want everybody to do it. So when a patient, she was like, well, you know, me and my sister went out and ate the other day. We went shopping. It was expensive. I go, really? How much did you guys spend? She was $90. I said, between the two of you, or each of you spent 90? She goes, always between the two of us. I said, okay, so it's 45 apiece. She goes, yeah. I said, well, how many meals was that for? She goes, well, that's for me because I'm going into the program slower, so I'm only going to do one meal a day. So that's 14 days of meals. I said, oh, really? So you basically spent $45 on 14 meals. So you're basically almost a little bit over $3 per meal. And we're talking good food. We're talking that they were having, we have a lot of people do is, it's a beef vegetable soup. It's really good. But all these meals that we put on there are very tasty. They're very healthy. And they're very good. And I said, so you're basically getting a $4 meal. My daughter, because I've taught my daughter, all my kids have cooked with me all my life. My kids love. My 18-year-old loves to cook. So that's a legacy I've given to her. Plus, guess what? I'm very close with my kids because guess what's one of the things we did? We cooked together, we ate together, and we spent time together. So we have a bond. Because I'm going to tell you what, parents, your kids aren't going to remember that you let them play for Nintendo or Xbox or whatever for 5 hours a day up in their room. Because when they get older, and I can guarantee you do this, when you think back about your parents, it's something that your parents did with you. Okay? And that's what we're trying to get parents back to thinking about. You're trying to give a legacy to your kids and health to your kids. So anyhow, my daughter made, she kind of came up with the recipe herself. But she takes salmon. We had a big piece of salmon, cost us $20 for the salmon. And then we used cauliflower rice, and then she used a little bit of soy sauce and the cauliflower rice to give it some flavor. And then we used she makes had a sriracha mayo, used a bunch of spices on that. So we had a salmon dinner, and then she also made stuffed mushrooms. I think the whole meal probably less than, because the salmon was fed 4, and I mean, we had a pretty decent sized piece of salmon. I think the whole meal was probably less than $5.50.
Wow.
And if you would have had that meal at a restaurant, that was easily a $40 dish at a restaurant. So the cost factor, it's actually, there's a myth out there, oh, it costs so much to eat healthy. No, it doesn't. It may cost you a lot of money at one time when you go buy the stuff, but if you actually break it down per meal, what you're spending, it's very inexpensive.
Well, and we've talked about this in other episodes a little bit about new-lifeweightloss.com. One of the pluses is the shopping lists and the meal planning that you put together for this program to make it easier on people. And so that's one of the ways, we're talking about a lot of negative things today, but that's one of the solutions is something like this that can get you on the right steps to a lifestyle change. Absolutely.
And the reason we kind of put together the program, and it's kind of a brainchild, again, of Miriam when we started, like I said, our online service and not the weight loss program, we kind of did that work together. And the idea behind it is let's give people, because people just, lost the art of cooking. And there's too much information out there on the websites, or the internet. And so when we started doing put these meals together and this program together, we put them through nutrition calculator to make sure they're healthy. And so when we first, like, for example, the smoothie drinks, and everybody, these smoothie drinks are so healthy. Man, I was actually flabbergasted when I put them in the calculator. Some of these are coming back to 70 to 100 grams of carbs per drink. Yeah. So try to give you an idea, the human body, to function pretty decent, or not pretty decent, to function very healthily, as far as amount of carbohydrates that they take in, is 70 to 100 grams a day.
We're getting that in one smoothie.
Yeah. They get that one smoothie.
Yeah. Well, we've only got a few minutes left of this particular episode, and we may get into some more of this next week if we have to, but I know there were some numbers that you wanted to look at. For those on YouTube, you can see the graph as we put it up. There's some numbers that kind of talk about how from the 60s and 70s on through to today, how this childhood obesity problem has progressed with the advent of fast food and convenience and busy lifestyles that changed the way that we look at nutrition. So why don't you take a look at this with us, Dr. Tyndall?
So real quick, if those people that are on the podcast, the YouTube people can see the graph, but those who listen to the podcast can't. But if you look from 1963 to about 1976, actually 1974, you'll see the lines kind of basically flat.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you see in 1974, 1976, the graph starts to climb very quickly, almost like a rocket ship kind of taking off with childhood obesity and stuff. And then what's interesting, if you take this graph and you lay it over increase in cardiovascular disease, increase in adult obesity, increase in cancer, all of the graphs look basically the same.
Yeah.
Take off. So what is significant? What kind of really significantly happened in the 70s? Well, you had the booming of fast food restaurants, but the big thing was we started listening to researchers and, okay, people may not like this, but medical doctors. Medical doctors do not know nutrition. They know.
I can always tell when you're trying to be nice.
Well, our joke again is with MDs means more drugs.
Yeah.
And so what you had back in that time frame was, hey guys, it's saturated fats that are evil. So we're not going to eat any more. We got to get fats out of the diet. So we're going to stop eating cheese and butter and eggs and we got to get fats out of the diet. And so the only things that taste really good on the tongue, because it comes back to taste and pleasure, fats taste good. That's why you pay more for a ribeye steak than you pay for a sirloin steak. Why? Ribeye steak has more fat in it. Tastes better, right? So what happens when you take fats out of the diet? Guess what you have to put in to get food to taste good, especially processed food? Carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, high fructose corn syrup. All this stuff starts to come into play. And guess what happens with this stuff? It's killing our kids, it's killing our population, and it's killing us because we went to this craziness of no fat, low fat, and we got away from traditional eating, and we went to, you have to have this processed food now because it's been processed to be low fat, no fat. And guess what's happened to us? We gotten sicker and sicker, and we got taking more drugs. Again, like we talked about a little bit last week, United States citizens are 4.8% of the world population, and we take 75% of all the drugs. So it's not a lack of drug issue that we have in this country. It's a lack of healthy food issue that we have in this country.
Well, one of the stats that you guys, that we were talking about before we started this episode, before we began, we were talking about how there's 80% of kids that have insufficient cardiovascular function. And that all feeds into what we're talking about. So Dr. Stuber, as we're wrapping this episode up in these last couple of minutes, what would be something encouraging that you can say to parents or even any young people that are listening and like, I want to make a change? What's something you can give as advice today that can maybe help somebody get on the right path toward getting this figured out?
The best advice is keep it simple. If a lot of people have the perception that eating healthy is difficult, it's expensive, it doesn't taste good, and it's just not true. The entire program Dr. Tyndall has created at New-Life Weight Loss is inexpensive, and it makes it easy. Also, we're available to help people, to teach people if they have any hang-ups, if they have any questions, if concerns, they don't understand. We were talking about that. We are always talking to somebody, trying to help them, trying to educate them. The goal of the program is to help people get healthier. The emphasis there is on to help people. So I guess get out of your mind and just move forward into some action. And it only takes a simple little, just a change in your mindset will create a change in action. And it just isn't complicated.
Yeah, that's good. Miriam, do you have anything you want to add there? I think we lost the audio of Miriam somehow.
Yes.
There she is.
Oh, there she is.
So one other thing I wanted to mention, because we've been talking about diet and food a lot, and I just wanted to reiterate the importance of physical activity and the technology, the increase in technology that we've had just the past couple decades. It's only going to be more and more. And kids are on their iPhones and on their iPads and on their devices or video games. And it's only going to get worse as technology expands and more devices come out. I mean, an iPhone comes out, how much more just for like the change of a camera or, whatever it may be, or an update and just trying to sell. And I don't see it getting much better. So we really, really have to just watch for that and really pay attention and be careful what's around us. And we need to be responsible for our kids and for ourselves. And that's what we're also here for. We would like to be part in educating and helping to improve children's lives and people's lives in general. So
good. That's a good one. And Dr. Tyndall, as we close this one out, talk a little bit again briefly about, and just encourage these parents that it can be done. You can cook with your kids. You can teach them. You can have those memories while you're setting these foundations of a good lifestyle and not having to have them chase surgeries or pills or all these things that we started this conversation with.
Yeah. And, like Miriam and Julie talked about earlier, it comes back to education. And that's what we're here to do. That's why we kind of put the website together, why we do our naturopathic work, why we do the things that we're doing, why we're actually doing these podcasts, because we're trying to educate people. Because, back to that study I kind of mentioned maybe in a podcast a while back about chronic disease in America. Ultimately, your doctor should be the one who guides you, gives you education, does lifestyle medicine, which is diet and exercise, and the ultimate control from disease to wellness. It's not in the doctor's hands. It's not in our hands. It's in your hands. You make those decisions of what you're eating. You're making those decisions how you're going to live your lifestyle. You're just making those decisions, like Miriam said, on how long you're letting your kids do with devices and stuff. iPads, and I know they make great babysitters, but man, you're messing your kid up. There's lots of neurological problems. There's social problems that comes with those things. Those are topics for discussion for later. But it's basically back to parents. You're doing this stuff to your kids, and I know you don't want to hear this, but you need to hear it. So you need to start taking responsibility and saying, "Hey, what legacy do I want to give my kids and my future to them?"
Yeah, that's powerful. We have a lot of information that's coming your way through these podcasts. So if you do have questions, last week we were able to do a little bit of a Q&A. You can email contact newlifenaturopathic@gmail.com. And that's where you can put your questions, and we'll have one of those episodes every now and then where we answer your questions directly from our team at New Life Naturopathic. And as far as folks that are following us on this podcast journey, Pursuit of New Life, you can find that on any podcast platform. We encourage you to find New Life Naturopathic on YouTube. That's where you can see some of the graphs and things and see us talking and all of that good stuff, the video side of things. But we're very excited to see what else is coming out of this as Dr. Tyndall and his team are continuing to put work in at the New Life website, new-lifeweightloss.com. And you've heard us talk about it quite often, but I encourage you to go see that, and also encourage you to share this podcast with your friends. Pursuit of New Life. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you much, Quincy.
Thanks.